Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Madeline, and this is my first ever YouTube book review slash analysis video. I have been an avid reader my entire life, so much so that I pursued a somewhat useless BA in English literature, making me sort of a certified book girly. Now, I say somewhat useless because there is one use at least, and it's that I can get on here and talk about this with a bit of confidence. I made this channel for one main reason, and it's that I love to talk about books. But despite my many years in the bookish world, I don't know many people who feel the same. This oftentimes leaves me feeling like a shaken up soda bottle. I mean, the only thing I want to do after reading a good book is talk about it, and I can't, which is where you come in. So, welcome, and I hope you stick around. Now, enough about me. Let's talk about The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. I was really impressed with this book. I don't think you can go wrong with Stephen King. He crafts such masterful, nuanced, and compelling stories, but for a 200-page book, this story was packed with suspense. It's written in third person omniscient, which is something that I think a lot of authors fumble, but Stephen King executes it so perfectly. I had such a hard time putting this book down. The concept itself is scary enough. Trisha is a 9-year-old girl who is lost in the woods, and as you read, you watch her wander further and further from her last known location. It's the kind of book where you're literally screaming at the pages in hopes that the character will somehow hear you. Trisha faces so many natural horrors while she's lost in the wilderness, from bee stings to nasty falls to stomach parasites, but the scariest of all is the unseen monster that stalks her through the woods. That's right, she does not see this monster, but she can feel its presence deeply. If you haven't read the book and you're actively avoiding spoilers, now would be the time to stop the video because we are going to get into the fine details, paying special attention to the ending of the book. For anyone who hasn't read the book but doesn't really want to, or anybody who read it a long time ago and maybe forgets certain things, we are going to do a quick summary just so that we're all on the same page. No pun intended. Here's a quote that I think perfectly sums up this story. The world had teeth, and it could bite you with them any time it wanted. Yep, yep. So, Trisha is a 9-year-old girl who wanders away from her perpetually arguing family during a hike up the Appalachian Trail near Maine. She quickly realizes she's lost, but she is confident and she thinks she can find her way back. And we, as the readers, watch helplessly as she gets further and further away from her mother and brother, who don't even notice she's gone until 15 minutes after she's left them. Trisha is a really smart kid, and she knows to conserve her food and water as well as to curl up under a fallen log during the rainstorm that ensues, thus covering her footprints. She's clever enough to remember from an episode of Little House on the Prairie that she should look for running water if lost because it will lead her to bigger water and therefore people. But days go by, and Trisha runs out of food and water. She has to drink from a creek, making her very, very ill. She's injured and covered in bug bites from her head to her toes. I'm not even kidding, she has bug bites on her eyelids. Over the entire 10-day ordeal, I think she loses like 20 pounds or something. Things are just really not looking good. She must wade through swamps, trample over long dead woods, and while all of this is going on, she has to avoid and even at times confront the monster. Like I said, this monster is an unseen being, but it can speak to Trisha. She hears it in her mind, talking about itself in third person through what she calls the cold voice. It says terrible things, and here's one example. It's a special thing, Trisha, the thing that waits for the lost ones. It lets them wander until they're good and scared because fear makes them taste better. And then it comes for them, and when you see its face, you'll go insane. And it really does seem like it wants Trisha to go insane, to feel real, true terror. After a beautiful encounter with a doe and fawn, Trisha finds the mutilated body of the fawn, left there for her by the creature. To quote directly, it was the severed head of a small deer. Its eyes shimmered with nits. Regiments of flies had lit on the ragged stump of its neck. They hummed like a small motor. The book goes on to say, the rest of the deer was lying near the spot where Trisha finally climbed out of the swamp. It lay in two pieces which were connected by a snarl of intestines. One of its legs had been torn off and stood propped up against the trunk of a nearby tree like a walking stick. Again, this girl is 9 years old. Imagine the horror. And note that the deer's body is waiting for her at exactly the spot where she climbs out of the swamp, almost as if the creature knew she was going to take that path. And not to mention, the swamp has been her most harrowing journey yet. This is on day 2 or 3 of being lost in the wilderness, and she is covered in bug bites and muck, and she has been walking for miles and miles, and then she gets this. At the same time, though, we know as readers that Trisha is experiencing hallucinations. She sees 3 priests, one which is entirely made of wasps, and if her head is able to create that, then what's to say that the deer aren't also a figment of her imagination? Trisha's only solace throughout her time in the woods is Tom Gordon, a baseball player who she adores. She listens to his games through her Walkman, and when that breaks, she imagines that he's taking this journey alongside her instead. Now, that's about all you need to know to be able to form your own opinion on the ending of the book, so let's get into it. In the last few pages, when Trisha is finally found by the hunter after over a week in the wilderness, we are being led to believe that the creature that's been after her has been a bear the whole time. It's actually an easy enough theory to believe. I mean, the only 2 witnesses we have of the monster are sort of unreliable, and it's easy to imagine that to a 9-year-old girl lost in the woods, all of those native animal sounds would generate real terror, and that terror might manifest itself as a monster. Again, we also know for a fact that Trisha is experiencing hallucinations by the time she comes face to face with this bear. She describes the bear in a really grotesque way. Its mouth is swarming with wasps, its eye sockets are filled with maggots, its ears are crawling with no-see-ums, features that the hunter does not mention in his description, notably. It could very well be just a bear. That being said, this is just not the notion I subscribe to personally. I think that what Trisha is up against is something a lot more sinister and a lot more akin to a skinwalker. Stephen King loves spooky creatures. We know this. We've seen The Wendigo, we've seen It, we've seen The Outsider. And after all, the book is set in the Appalachian Mountains where skinwalkers are rumored to reside. When Trisha is found by the hunter, he describes something peculiar. The quote goes, "He didn't know what he had seen. He hadn't been sure it was a bear, but that he never told anyone. Folks knew he drank, and they would think he was crazy." So here's a grown man with experience in the wilderness and experience as a hunter, and he's affirming that this creature doesn't seem like a real bear. Yes, maybe he's a little unreliable due to his alcoholism, but still, even if he had a tendency to drink, he wasn't starved, dehydrated, and delirious like Trisha was. He had no reason to imagine something strange or something that wasn't actually there. It's this small detail that's the biggest piece of evidence going toward my claim. When I imagine a creature that can shapeshift from the horned creature that Trisha describes earlier when the book says it wasn't human, nor did she think it was an animal, a creature which might torture a little girl in the woods, playing with the mutilated bodies of deer, stalking her at night, talking to her in her mind, preying on her vulnerability, I too think of nothing akin to an animal or a human. Like I said, I think of a creature. Say the deer aren't a hallucination, and there's no definitive proof to say that they are. What bear is leaving behind a carcass uneaten in June? The god of the lost, as Trisha comes to call this monster, even speaks to her, which is a characteristic said to belong to skinwalkers. They are supposedly able to mimic human voices to manipulate their victims. So, is that the cold voice that Trisha keeps hearing? Let's explore the possibilities, though. Maybe it's not a skinwalker, maybe it's it, maybe it's the outsider. We don't really know. It's all up to the reader's interpretation in the end. I like the thought of something spooky because that's what draws me in and excites me, but I can't completely dismiss the argument that it is just a bear. At the end of the day, this story is primarily about a little girl's survival, which is enough, supernatural interference aside. But let me know, are you Team Bear or Team something else? Or are you just flat out Team Trisha? Who cares about the rest? I mean, she made it out, right? Overall, I think this is a really underrated King story. I mean, I've seen some bad reviews online and I just don't get it. I was enthralled the entire way through. And I'm honestly surprised that more people haven't seemed to have read it. If you're looking for a really quick and thrilling weekend read, I highly recommend it. And if you have read it and have any thoughts, opinions, or ideas, whether they align with mine or differ from them, please share because I am so open to discussion and really excited to talk about this with somebody. I want to finish off the video with my favorite quotation from the book. This comes in a flashback where Trisha asks her father about God. He answers, I don't believe in any actual thinking God that marks the fall of every bird in Australia or every bug in India. A God that records all of our sins in a big golden book and judges us when we die. I don't want to believe in a God who would deliberately create bad people and then deliberately send them to roast in a hell he created. But I believe there has to be something. I believe that it's this logic that gets Trisha through this terrible, terrible time in her life. I mean, after going through something so harrowing, it would be really hard to accept that God exists and put you through something like that on purpose. Anyway, let me know what you think, and happy reading.